Hi, I'm David from Levica Photography, and today we'll be talking about the Sigma 19mm EX DN lens. This lens comes with a lens hood, which you guys know already if you've seen my other reviews on the DN lenses that these really aren't necessary. I don't know why they put them on there, so this goes back in the box for now. But this is the 60mm that we reviewed last week, and this is the art variant. The difference is the EX is the older version and the art is the newer version. The art comes in a metal body and it looks fancy. The EXs have a plastic body and look more traditional. I guess that's a good way to put it. Outside of that, everything else is the same. 46mm threads on the front, 7-bladed aperture, same brass E-mount on the back. And both rock-solid performers. They both have the same magnetic focusing motor, which you guys told me about after last week. And today we're going to do something a little different, because usually when I do a lens review, I just review the lens by itself. But I am actually able to do a comparison today. The Sony 20mm F2.8 Pancake. And, you know, these are pretty much direct competitors with each other. This one's $350, whereas this one's $200. Realistically, the size is a little different. And, you know, aside from the 1mm, close focusing is about the same. And let me see here. If I remember right, this one is 7 inches. This one's about 6.5. So really, you know, an excellent way to look at both of these lenses. So maybe we could do something like a little bit of a drag race or something. What do you think? Let's go check this out. Derp, 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 derp. Over here we have the Sony 20mm F2.8, and over here we have the Sigma 19mm F2.8. Now, with these two particular images, I shut off the image correction so you could see what it looked like right off the camera. And the Sony 20mm F2.8 obviously vignettes a lot more than the Sigma. Now if we go in and actually look at the image, and keep in mind this is with image correction turned off. Alright, so they seem to be evenly sharp in the center. And I want to say at f2.8 they're probably running somewhere around 2,800 lines of resolution each, maybe a little bit more. So right here is where you see a big difference. This is the Sony, this is the Sigma. Look at how much more detail you have in the Sigma right here. So, you know, I did shoot a resolution chart, and these were actually testing, well, the Sigma itself was testing 3,100 lines of resolution, whereas the Sony was testing closer to 2,900. But you really see the difference in the foliage of the trees. Okay, so now if we go up into the upper corner, we see lots of CAs and lots of vignetting, along with a really soft corner on the Sony. On the Sigma, it's holding together much better. This is what I expect it to look like for you know, a very decent lens. Okay, so really quick, let's go over to the tile on the roof. We'll do the same thing here. Okay, now this is what kind of surprised me. On the Sony, you see how the tree here is, it almost seems like it's out of focus. On the Sigma, the tree itself seems to be sharper, but the amount of flaring on the Sigma lens is actually more than the Sony. And if we zoom in here, we can actually count, it's about 4 pixels deep, whereas on the Sony it's more like 3. But luckily, if I go to the next image here, 54, let me go to 40, whoop, past it, 45, and let me go to 54 here. Okay, now this is f2.8 on both lenses with the software correction turned on. the actual lens, and so we still have some ghosting on the Sigma. The Sony is still vignetting, but let me see here. That's about the same right there. The Sigma is holding up better in the corners, although it's still ghosting and slightly soft, but it's not nearly as bad as the Sony. Okay, now let's look at the flare control on the other side. Let me skip over that way because that seems to be quicker. Okay, so the flare control on both, the software took care of it, but the Sigma is definitely better towards the corners. Alright, so now let's zoom into the trees again here. And we got a little bit of maybe a blur from the wind on this right here, but the image itself is actually slightly softer. And this is at 149, f7.1. Okay, so let's take a look at our base here in the center, and the Sigma is noticeably sharper. And let's go to, this should be F9 here, 159, yeah, F9. Okay, so at F9, and these are all at ISO 100, by the way. Let's go into the upper corner and get way up into it. Okay, so that should be about correct. Alright, so the Sigma is definitely sharper at F9. Now let's take a look at our sign again. And, whoop, grab the wrong one. Okay, right here the Sony is still saying it's a little soft, whereas the Sigma is still staying razor sharp. Although the detail, if you actually look at the flowers here, the detail is still a little higher on the Sigma. Okay, and let's take a look at our aloe in the shadows here. Aloe is definitely sharper on the Sigma. Okay, so let's skip ahead here. Okay, now we're at 153. Should be, okay, f16. Now this is where the Sony stops. Its last f-stop is 116. Do not go past go at 116. Okay, so let's zoom into our tree here. You get to about the same spot. There we go. So the Sigma is still holding up better at f116 or at f16. Can't talk. Okay, so let's take a look at our sign. All right, the Sigma is definitely holding up a little bit better. Still very sharp. There we go. That's about the right distance. Although the Sony is not bad at f16, it's actually doing better than I thought. Now let's look at the center of this tree over here. So towards the center they seem to be almost equal. The Sony is still a little bit softer because it doesn't resolve as high as the Sigma. Like I said before, the Sigma seems to be resolving at 3100 and the Sony at 2900. So you're just going to squeeze out a little bit more detail out of the Sigma. But right here in the other corner, they both look identical. Now let's go down to our aloe again. And our aloe also look identical in the planners. So at this point, the Sony 20mm F2.8 is pretty much resolving the same as the Sigma. Now, this is at f16. This is where the Sony stops. The Sigma still has 2 more stops. This has the fastest autofocus that I've seen in a while, and this thing might actually trump it. So let's play around with some autofocus. Video in stereo. Stereo, whoa. 19 Sigma 19mm, Sony 20mm. Let's see how these do. Okay, so the purpose of this test is to actually see how fast each lens focuses. They're both set on the same speed, and they're both at the same aperture, f-stop, ISO, shutter speed, same center of focus. And, you know, really, it's hard to tell between the two. But if you'll just barely notice, the Sigma might be a hair faster. And it really shows in this test. And if you'll notice, the Sigma seems to lock on, not necessarily lock on, but just move into position faster. But I mean, it's barely noticeable. Alright, so let's take a look at some lens flaring. And this is an LED light hanging from the ceiling. And you'll notice right off the bat that the Sony has just slightly more flaring than the Sigma. And although, you know, realistically it's not bad, but it shows more, or more pronounced. Alright, so here's the CFL test. And the CFL test will have a tendency to leave a trail. So if you notice on the Sony side, you'll see there's a slight blue cast trail right behind it. There you go, you can see it there. Okay, so what was the end result of shooting on the A6000? The Sigma flattened the Sony like a pancake. Like a pancake, because it's a pancake. Yeah, well, anyway, it did seem to outperform the Sony. Now, really quick, let me just say a couple of things about these lenses. They're both F2.8, they're both 20mm, they're both extremely fast at autofocusing. The actual focal length that you get on the Sony A6000 is going to be 30mm on the Pancake and 28mm on the 19. They look almost identical. The 19 is noticeably slightly wider. On a 4/3 camera, you're going to get double the focal length, so your 19 is going to be a 38 and your 20 is going to be a 40. Now, F2.8 means that the actual depth of field versus a full frame is f4. But it holds up just fine. Now, usually with wide-angle lenses, you don't have to worry so much about the bokeh. This does have the 7-bladed round aperture, so the bokeh is excellent. This one also has a round aperture, but it's a smaller aperture. Well, not really. Maybe. I don't know. They're both tiny to me. But realistically, the amount of light let in on these is just phenomenal. They work extremely well. This one is Sony's fastest autofocusing prime, in my opinion. I think it does an excellent job, but at $350, that's an excellent price to pay for extremely portable lenses. But the Sigma is sharper all around. Sharper in the center, definitely sharper on the corners. Excellent image quality all the way up to f16. At f18 and f22 it fails, to where I wouldn't even use them. But at f16, everything that you could think of, because it's such, it's not really an ultra-wide lens, it's just considered kind of a normal wide. But at that focal length, f16 is more than enough to get you from what's in front of you all the way to infinity in focus with ease. And this does an amazing job. And like I said before, the difference between the EX lenses and art lenses is in the body. This one has a plastic body, whereas the art lenses have a metal body, and that's the only distinction between them. It's the same elements, same focus motor, same internals, same base, same front threads. Actually, it's the same front system. Literally, it's just these two parts. Those are metal, these are plastic. In the long run, this is going to look a little bit better in a year. The aluminum ones are going to scratch easy. And the reason why is because on the aluminum body right here, this is there's different grades of aluminum that you can get in hardness. And this one, because of the way it's polished, is actually very soft. It scratches really easy. The base is a much harder aluminum. And you have this fancy A. But outside of that, is it really worth it? I prefer the older EX ones, but that's my personal preference. I use my cameras every day. They get a little beat up. So in the long run, this will hold up better. So realistically, phenomenal lens. I recommend that anybody that owns a Sony A6000, A5100, NEX7, NEX5, they go out and buy the entire line. The 60, the 30, and the 19. You cannot go wrong with these. I did have a little bit of a variance on the 30 because I had two of them, and the 130 was slightly sharper than the other, but outside of that, they were pretty much identical. This is an excellent copy of this lens. So this will definitely stay in my bag for a really long time. So with that being said, I will leave you guys with a short video of my pets, because I know that a lot of you guys like to go out and shoot your pets, and I shot it with this lens. So on that note, I hope you guys like my video. If you have any questions, please leave me a comment. Otherwise, you guys have a good day, and I'll talk to you later.